Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started and let people come in, as they roll in, as we all do. I mean, the beauty of online meetings is you can just show up, but also, I don't know about you, that sometimes doesn't necessarily mean I'm always on time. So welcome to the Figure Your Shit Out webinar. I am so pumped that you're here. For those who don't know me, my name is Christina Marie Noel. I am a marketing strategist and business coach, and I am obsessed with helping mission-driven organizations and founders thrive, really with the goal of helping create more purpose-driven jobs. So like the things that drives me is jobs, which is why I'm super pumped to be here today to talk to you about the 10 things you need to be thinking about to build and grow your business, right? We all want to kick ass and take names this year. So just to give you a little bit of like the run of show, I'm going to definitely first dive in and talk about the 10 things you should be thinking about. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the FYSO Accelerator. So for those of you who might be interested in some community and strategic support, we'll talk about that. And then we'll end with some time for Q&A, question and answer. So to go ahead and dive in, the good news is I'm going to go into a lot. It's 10 things. I tend to be pretty aggressive about loving to cover a lot of content in a very short amount of time. But the good news is there's also additional resources. So there's a thing called the FYSO Founders Guide. It's free. It's online. It's like 101 pages, but don't worry, there's pictures. It's not all content. But I'm going to give you a link to that after this. So you have that as a resource. And then also there's the Accelerator, which we can talk about. So a little bit about me. Why am I here? What am I up to? What have I done in the past? I've been a social entrepreneur for about 8 years now. And over that time, I've worked with more than 50 mission-driven organizations. A handful of them are on here. And in that time, it has just been my pleasure to understand what does it take to grow and use business as a force for good. And my story really started here. This is me in Burlington, Vermont at Ben & Jerry's. How many of you like ice cream? Raise your hand. Yeah, yes, no. I am obsessed. So between my first and second year of my MBA program, I got hired on by an organization called B Lab. They're the nonprofit behind the global B Corp movement. The B stands for benefit. And basically what I got paid to do is travel up and down the East Coast and meet with like mission-driven companies and audit their practices, including visiting Ben & Jerry's, which was crazy. So just think like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but like instead of it being scary, having like a delightful man, like opening up vats of ice cream and letting you smell the chocolate. Ice cream off the line does taste better, in case you're wondering. But then for me, it was so much more than that. We got to interview employees and hear how working at Ben & Jerry's changed their lives. If you've never been to Burlington, Vermont, it's a really cute college town and it's thriving because, well, first off, it's beautiful. There's like Lake Champlain, it's gorgeous. But because of Ben & Jerry's, there's great employment, there's amazing tourism. And for me, that like day like hit home this idea that I wanted to dedicate my life to understanding like, how do we create these amazing jobs? Like, how do we create these amazing businesses? And so that is what we're going to talk about today. So it's kind of in two phases that I break up this content. The first is it's really the house metaphor, right? If you're going to build a house, you need a solid foundation. So we're going to talk about what is the solid foundation of a sustainable, profitable business. And then we'll talk about how do you build it and then how do you grow it. Doesn't quite match the metaphor, but you get what I'm talking about. I think you can forgive me. So if you've never heard of so it's a 5P model. I'm very nerdy. You might recognize this like 4 Ps of marketing. It's like price, product, place, promotion. That's not what these are. These are like these other Ps that I came up with. And the first one is personal goals. What are your personal goals? And you were thinking, how is this about building and growing my business? I can answer that question. When most people start a business, they start with an idea, right? Or a problem that they want to solve. Although, I mean, some do have financial goals tied to it, right? But when it comes to mission-driven organizations, sometimes it is easy to get so excited about an idea that you don't take the time to look at what are my goals in life. what does success look like to me? And so when I work with organizations and especially with founders, I always ask them to take time to look at success for themselves and really like reflect on, what are your long-term financial goals? What are your career goals? What kind of work do you like doing? What are your skill sets? Where do you want to work? Do you want to work remote? Do you want to work in an office? Do you want a big team? Or would you rather just be a solopreneur? There's no right or wrong answer. But at the same time, like, even though I'm 3 years into my business, I'm still constantly asking myself these foundational questions. And even now, I'm still asking myself every year, is the work that I'm doing getting me closer to the goals that I have for myself? Knowing that like I have my 10 and 20-year goals of where I want to be and what I want to do. Plus, they say that when you write your goals down, you're infinitely more likely to achieve them. So taking the time to understand, if you want to build a business, it needs to be as sustainable for you as a founder as it is going to be for the mission that you're trying to achieve. And so that is why, like in the Figure Your Shit Out Accelerator, it kind of hints at where we're going. It is figure your shit out. It is figuring out, what do you want? And sometimes that means that some founders will get into the process, or, you know, sometimes get into working with me and realize, you know what, like I had this idea of what I thought this was going to be. So for example, I mean, I've always thought it would be kind of cool to own a restaurant. Like, I just think it's so cool to like bring people together that way. But you know what? I also know that I would hate working the type of hours that it would take. And I don't know that I've really like, I'm an ambivert, but I'm not extroverted enough necessarily to want to be talking to people all day, right? And that's just a personal thing. But like when you start thinking about these kind of ideas, there's the idea and there's reality, and being able to ground yourself in reality is really valuable. Okay, so now you know yourself, right? And all of the 5 minutes I talked about that. Next, you probably can tell I'm a little biased about purpose, but oh, I love it, Dominic, by the way. I see that you've owned a restaurant. Here, see, I do have a crush on like restaurants and food, if you can't tell. This is Bull City Burger and Brewery in Durham, North Carolina. If you've never been there, you should go there. It's incredible. All of their beef is grass-fed. All of their ingredients are sourced locally, except for ketchup. Turns out you cannot keep up with the ketchup supply. So they finally gave up. But they're certified B Corp, and they're incredibly mission driven. And for them, like, what's so great is their purpose drives what they do. So one of the goals that Seth, the founder of Bull City Burger, had is he wanted a restaurant industry, like restaurant jobs, to actually be a career option for people who wanted it. And so he pays living wage. And, you know, in turn, that means that, you know, customers sometimes pay a few bucks more for a burger, but at the same time, like that's a strategic decision and trade-off that you're making for better ingredients and, you know, better wages for their employees. And I think it's a win-win. The quality is so high. I mean, they're just wonderful. And I am here to make the argument that purpose feels good, but it also can create a strategic competitive advantage. And I don't want you to just take my words for it. I actually have my statistics here for you. So according to a 2018 research study by Cone Communications, 78% of Americans believe that companies must do more than just make money. They must positively impact society. Okay, so consumers care. 77% of consumers in America feel a stronger connection to purpose-driven companies. And 66%, 2/3, would switch from a product they typically buy to a purpose-driven one. So people would put their money where their values are. It's also worth mentioning, I don't know if you've ever heard of Unilever. There's this massive consumer products company. I mean, they have everything from like Dove to Axe body spray to Ben & Jerry's. They now own Ben & Jerry's. And in 2019, their CEO actually shared that their purpose-led sustainable brands, so their mission-driven brands, are growing 69% faster than the rest of the business and driving 75% of company growth. All right? This is not just feel good. That is how this massive conglomeration is growing. Beyond that, okay, why is that the case? Well, I mean, consumers care, but also your talent cares too. 67% of millennials look at a company's social and environmental, you know, impact before deciding where to work. Also, we have a major crisis of unengagement at work. Like 70% of Americans are unengaged. But if you work for employees at mission-driven companies, 73% are engaged. So it's like, it flips it on its head. So it's not perfect, but engaged employees are more productive. There's many studies in Harvard Business Review that have shown that. And engaged employees, 144% productive. And an inspired employee is 225% productive. And all this to be said, I also think purpose is a great strategy too. And taking the time, and that's just it. Like there are mission-driven companies that haven't always mapped out their purpose or like figured out like what result they're driving. And so that's something I encourage you to always be looking at. So for example, for me, I knew I wanted to change the world through business, right? Like I wanted to help companies grow. But it wasn't until I realized that like job growth was really like the outcome I wanted to drive, that's helped me figure out what opportunities am I going to say yes to versus what am I not? Because I've definitely had like consulting opportunities come across my desk that are with amazing organizations and I passed on them and I'm like, why? And I'm like, oh, it's an amazing organization, but I don't think that role would have helped create good jobs or would have helped like lead to the growth that, the projects I want to be working on would achieve. So things to consider: what is your purpose, and not just what is it, but like what outcomes are you trying to drive? Because as Simon Sinek says, people don't care about what you do, they care about why you do it. Next, we do have to talk about money, right? I'm trying to make you profitable here. Profit is so fascinating to me, and working, for years with mission-driven individuals, I do see very mission-driven entrepreneurs really stumble on profit models because this is tricky, right? Like dependent upon what industry you're working in, it can be hard to figure out what is a sustainable business model or a sustainable profit model for your organization. So like, for example, the company that I worked at before I took the leap so to become a certified B Corp, you have to take this assessment. And the way we were rewarded we got a bunch of points for working with nonprofits in low income areas. And if you think about it, we were an insurance company, so it worked. Like insurance tends to be a highly profitable business model. But for most organizations, like they'd have a hard time selling services to nonprofits in under-resourced areas, right? So given that, like we were the exception to that, but still you have to think about, you have your mission, and then you also have to figure out how you're going to make money. And it's worth noting that some of the most famous mission-driven companies are oftentimes premium products. So, insurance is a premium product, but you kind of have to buy it. Like it's like a thing you have to do business safely. When I think of my favorite apparel company, Patagonia, I love them. Their clothes aren't cheap, right? They're really high quality. They're really well made. They will take your jacket and repair it. They want it to last forever. But in turn, you're going to invest in a Patagonia clothing item, right? So they can, drive the clothing industry to more environmental practices. So it's worth noting, like, who are customers who have the money to invest in your services? What profit margin makes most sense in your industry? And then, if you are a founder, it's probably worth sitting down with a financial planner to say, like, what kind of profit margins am I going to need to hire people, right? I highly recommend you don't do everything alone. That can only happen for so long. I've done it. Kaylee is on here. I love her so much. Being able to pay people helps you, right? That helps you live your mission. And so you should make enough money, again, to achieve your financial goals and to live your mission. Now we're starting to get into the marketing arena of the foundation, and it just, it makes me so happy. So positioning is one of my favorite topics in the world. And it is, how are you different in the sandbox that you're playing in? How are you different from your competitors? Like, what makes you unique? I would argue that one of the best business strategies is to be different. It's easy to say that though, right? Like whenever you think of the most iconic brands like Apple, like in many ways they were so like innovative at the time in their design and how they showed up and how they talked about themselves. But you have to think about your market. Like, what about your organization is going to help you stand out? And it can't just be, I did work at one organization that's like, our goal is to have the greatest customer service ever. Like, that's not the kind of thing that someone's gonna be like, oh my gosh, mom, I found this company that has great customer service, right? It's gotta be something that's compelling. So the first thing you have to think about from a positioning standpoint is, what is your market category? That is a fascinating topic. If you want to learn more about it, I highly recommend April Dunford. She's a positioning expert. What a market category is like what you call yourself. So for example, I've debated back and forth, am I a marketing strategist? Am I a business coach? I landed on marketing strategist and business coach, but I've been a consultant my whole career. You have to figure out what your customers care about. A really great example of one client that I worked with on positioning, they used to be called, they're a certified B Corp, they used to be called Unity Digital Agency. Well, what's a digital agency? Like, that can mean a lot of things. That can mean search engine optimization. That can mean paid advertising. That can mean social media marketing. In their case, it turns out they're founded by an incredible WordPress developer named Elisa Herr. And that's what Elisa decided, like, they wanted to be best in the world at. And so digital agency was vague. Like, when she was building her company, she tried different aspects of marketing, but she knew that she did not want to get into social media. She did not want to get into paid advertising. And so ultimately she repositioned her company by giving her organization a new market category. So they are now called Unity Web Agency. So when you hear that market category, like, if you can nail your market category, that can help enormously with your marketing. Like, that is just an invaluable decision that you can make that leads to a ton of assumptions made by your customers. So April Dunford, she talked about how she was working at a startup at one point that like created this amazing database. But at the time, like, the popular database for the clients that they were trying to sell to was Oracle. And so they would show up and pitch these companies and be like, we've got a database. And they'd be like, we already have Oracle, like, go away. We don't want to talk to you. But they eventually realized the product was created by database experts, but really it was like an analytical tool. And so when they repositioned themselves into like a quantitative tool, all of a sudden they started getting meetings and they were able to grow and thrive and build their business in an epic way. So, I mean, positioning matters. The other thing is thinking about features and how you show up. How does your competition look? What are their features? And then what are you going to be known for? I mean, there's certainly like the play that you could be best in the industry. Like, one of my favorite examples of a positioning that I just love is I knew I needed to buy a car. Of course, I quit my job and then my car died, right? That's how it tends to work. And I also knew we wanted to eventually start a family. So it was time for a midsize SUV, because I look young, but I have a bad back. And so the top car in the midsize SUV category was the Honda CR-V. Honda CR-V is really nice. If you have a Honda CR-V, it's arguably the best. But I got into a CR-V, I drove it, it was fine. But I wasn't dazzled. I was also kind of sad about like losing the peppiness. I'd driven a Volkswagen. So I was kind of sad to go to an SUV. But I'd heard about Subarus. Subaru as a brand has a pretty cult following. It's positioned very strongly for like the outdoor adventure. They have a very distinct brand, and every single Subaru automatically comes with a 4-wheel drive. So I showed up to the dealer, I got in a Subaru, I drove it for like 2 minutes and I was like, done. I was sold. There was nothing that like my husband or my family could say to me that would talk me out of buying that car, because they managed to make it 4-wheel drive in a way that was slightly more affordable than the CR-V, but also just the impression that I had of their product and their brand really resonated with me. Like, I was just in love with the product at first sight because they were different. And trust me, Subaru's not hurting. They seem to be thriving based on all the conversations that I had with the dealership. And now I'm a happy customer. Perception, the last of our foundation. Why should people care? Why do they trust you, right? I mean, we've all seen snake oil salesmen, as I like to call them, shady companies that are selling stuff that just seems, if it seems too good to be true, it usually is. I mean, not always. There are some pretty innovative products, but still, when you are starting out, it is so important to figure out how you're going to build trust. And as part of your marketing strategy, like gaining a reputation and signaling that you're trustworthy is really, really important. So how do you do this? I mean, let's be honest, how do you buy most things? I typically get it through word of mouth. So you make customers really happy. But I also look at customer reviews, right? I don't know about you. I used to love Yelp. I still am on Consumer Reports. I still do use it. And those Google reviews, those Yelp reviews, they matter, right? Like the perception of a company often matters. Other ways to signal trust. You could have a money back guarantee. You're so confident that you're guaranteeing success. Pretty good way to build trust, especially if you're first starting out. Free trials, try it before you buy it. Hey, you can create free content like this webinar today. You're getting a sense of, do you like me or not? I know I'm not for everyone. Customer testimonials. Do you have, so maybe it's not customer reviews, but if your service company is often done in the form of testimonials. So after I've worked with a client, I'll be like, so what did you like about our work together? Because that's a powerful way to like past performance predicts future success, right? When you are first starting out, that is one of like the hardest things is like, how do you find your first customer? You're probably going to have to lean on your resume or really your network. How can you leverage your network to get someone to trust you? Or you might have to create a pilot. So how can you pilot something either for free or at an affordable price? So you can get experience, you can confirm there's demand, you can develop it, and then in turn, build your reputation from there. The perception matters, truly. So with all that, I feel like I need to catch my breath. I do speak quickly, but don't worry. I'm happy to go back in the Q&A if you have any questions. So knowing that foundation, you're probably thinking it's simple, right? Like all of those things are pretty obvious, but a lot of my work is very simple, but not easy, right? Like it's simple to have a great idea. It's simple to, come up with a strategy for like, oh, I'm going to get customer testimonials, but it's never easy. Like the ultimate thing that's challenging about being an entrepreneur is finding the right customer, finding the right product market fit, finding, the right positioning. It's not always clear until you get in there. So how do you build this foundation that's going to set you up for success? And that is where market research comes in, which is my happy, magical place. So there's 3 different types of research that we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about competitive insight or competitor research. It's always good to know who is in your market. And if there's nobody in your market, just FYI, that can sometimes be a red flag. Also, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Thanks, Bruce. Oh, trust mark certification marks. That's a good point. B Corp certification. I like that. All right. So yes, certifications or trust marks are another way to signal quality. Back to building it. How do you build this? We have to look at your competition. What are they doing? How do they show up and talk about themselves? What's their value proposition? Like, how do they say they serve their customers? What about them is so appealing that people are spending their time and money with them? Is there a customer that they might be ignoring? Is there a feature that you could, create that might not exist? Or is there an angle that like hasn't yet been addressed, right? That could like position you uniquely. The customer is the ultimate, like, or an understanding, or even like the competitor and then the customer, like, how does your competition show up? And then how are you going to be different? Like you have to know your competition to then be able to position yourself strategically. One thing that's worth noting is if you're a mission-driven entrepreneur, I have actually talked to competitors. So I thought, in a very deep way, did I want a marketing agency? So I've actually had like great coffee conversations with marketing agency heads. It is amazing if you have, friendly competition. They knew that I was going to probably most likely position myself in a different way. And so if you have an abundance mindset, you never know, you might actually be able to go talk to the competition and see like, What have they learned? Why do they do things the way they do them? You know, what is their approach? Depends on the industry, sure, but if you can, it's really valuable. And then from there, you then have to know your customer. So customer. I am obsessed with the customer. And this is, again, it seems so obvious, but this is actually one of the most complex and like crucial things that you can always be doing for your business. 3 years in, I'm still talking to my customers. I'm still trying to understand them better. I'm still trying to figure out what are their hopes and dreams and needs and gaps, so I can then better match my marketing to their needs or my products and services to their needs. Because if you don't do this research, you can't figure out where to go, right? Like there is no marketing strategy or no like effective product and service without your customer. So who is your customer? What do they care about? How do you talk to their needs or speak to their needs? One thing that I learned from a friend who's an entrepreneur is this concept that, are you a vitamin to your customer or are you a painkiller? Because vitamins are nice to have, right? Like I do take vitamins, but when I'm in pain, I am a lot more motivated to make an investment. And so if you can build a service or you can speak to your customers' pain points, that is going to be infinitely more compelling. And I'm just going to be real. People are lazy. So let's talk about people too, right? Like there's this idealistic vision of like, I'm going to go talk to people and they're going to be honest. No, like we're lazy, we're overwhelmed, we're tired, our inboxes are full. Like we are working around the clock. And then when we're not working, we're with our family, right? Like people, we have so much on our plates in the world that we live in, especially in 2021 with the pandemic. And so still, most of us do have pains. Like there's certain pain points that if you could solve, I'm willing to have a conversation with, like I'm willing to take an action and actually consider making an investment. But when it comes to like vitamins, sometimes there's a pain point that I won't spend money on. And so figuring out like customer validation, I often say like no money, no validation. Because here's a secret, customers lie. So the number one tip I'm going to give you today when it comes to interviewing customers is if you have a new product or service coming out, do not tell them upfront what you do. Do not. Because what's going to happen? So if I come up to you and I'm like, hey, I'm going to speak to Nathan because Nathan's on the call and he's up on my screen right now. Nathan, I have this amazing idea for a new training. I am so excited about it. Let me tell you about it. And then I launched my pitch of the training. What's Nathan going to do? Like we've been friends for a while. I mean, now Nathan, because he knows me, he might actually be honest. Like there are some people who will shoot it to you straight. But for the most part, people don't want to squash your dreams. They want you to succeed. And we are taught to be nice. And so if you start with like what your solution is, you're not going to get the insights you need to actually like understand the person you're talking to's real problem. And so that is like the most rookie mistake, but it's so key. And I love it. Dominic says, put the why before the what. So sometimes I do get haters on this point. And let me talk about what the haters, I hear you. So I'll often get quoted Henry Ford's quote, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster horse. Sure. If you were building something super innovative, they may not be able to grasp what it is you're doing. But that doesn't mean the interviewing customers still can't indicate helpful things when it comes to your product or service development. So if I was building the car, I would still interview my customers to understand how much money are you spending on carriages per day or per week? How often do you try to get around? Like I would go to the wealthy and see like how often they travel and like, you know, how much of their income they're willing to spend on their travel. Because then you can start to get the sense of like, how did he figure out how to price the car, right? How do you figure out what kind of features you might like? And even if your customers may not quite understand it, you can still start to get to understand their needs. And sometimes even the ones that might not even be spoken, like their unspoken needs that they're kind of talking around. Because oftentimes there's like, you know, my arm hurts, but then below that, it might be like, my arm hurts and now I'm afraid I'm not gonna be able to work. And now I'm like afraid I'm not gonna have a job, right? And then you can get to like even deeper, like the meaning of like worth and worthiness. So I mean, like we are complex human beings, right? And so understanding who they are, and if nothing else, customer research teaches you how to speak their language. How do they talk? What are they reading? Where are they at? You know, who influences them? What conferences are they going to? What publications are they reading? You know, how do they say things? That's invaluable marketing content insights. So like it is just a win-win-win to talk to your customers always. Did you ever want a faster horse? I love that, Dominic. I love that. Do you want more horse droppings? I love it. All right. So customers, if you can't tell, I'm a little bit passionate about that topic. So next, what are you going to do with this competitive and customer research? This is where you create your minimum viable product, or you create a prototype. So prototype is just the easiest way to test early and quickly to confirm whether there's a demand for what you're creating, or to get insights on how to make it better. This is so, so important. I'm a huge believer in like, don't bet the farm on something. Don't go create your masterpiece in a closet for 2 years. Create something dirty that's kind of embarrassing, that's kind of messy, and then put it out in the world. Like if you're kind of embarrassed by your prototype, that's excellent. You're probably right on time. So examples of prototypes, you may have seen the model homes. I mean, that's just like in the real world. Like you can go see the model home before they build the neighborhood. So you can get a sense of what kind of home do I want? What kind of features in that model home do I want? In business, it can be as simple as a one-pager. Sometimes there's like the napkin prototype, like here's how I'm gonna map my business out on a napkin. For others, it's here's my one-pager. Like if I'm gonna offer a workshop, I'll just create a one-pager. It takes like an hour, maybe 2 if I'm gonna go really fancy. And then I get it out there and I see, is anybody gonna sign up for it? I will typically create the prototype before I create the workshop because I wanna know, am I building something that people even want? You can also do the same thing with the landing page. Like it is actually more affordable now than ever to build a prototype. So for example, MailChimp, it's free. I still use it. You can create a landing page for free. And you can be like, hey, we have this amazing new product coming. Do you want to sign up? Do you want to join the wait list? Like wait lists are a way to confirm would people pay you for what you're trying to do. All that being said, test. And then once you get it out there, then that's when you're going to start learning, right? You're going to hear, yes, we want this thing, or no, we don't. And then from there, you can maybe ask for feedback. Oh, okay, you didn't want this, or you didn't want this feature. What would you rather have instead? Or maybe you want this. Hey, we're going to do this workshop. You might even follow up if people sign up for the waitlist and be like, hey, this is the map of what we're learning. Is there anything else you'd like me to address? I mean, I am constantly sending surveys, even to the Accelerator program I run, to say what was helpful, what wasn't. How can we make it better? How can we make it more compelling? What do you need? What do you, what are your unmet needs? And then eventually you will have built your foundation. And I consider you've built your foundation once you have product market fit, i.e. like you found a customer that's willing to pay you, and there's a sense that what you're building is going to have demand. And then from there, now how do we grow it, right? Like how do we put fuel on this fire? How do we, get that house to like an even more solid ground, or build the neighborhood maybe if you're, entrepreneurial. So now we get into marketing, like traditional marketing. So there's brand strategy. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, whenever you're first starting out, you need to have some semblance of a brand, right? Like in your competitive research, should have at least had a sense of like, how does the competition talk about themselves versus like, how am I going to show up? But I am a huge believer in like waiting until you are confident you know who your customer is before making an investment and really like digging deep into your brand strategy. Also, brand is who your company is. What is its personality? How do people talk about you or your company when you're not in the room? You know, a lot of people think brands are logo, like the app, you know, the Nike swoosh or the Apple logo. Or in this case, we've got SOLA Coffee's beautiful logo. I actually have their shirt on today. They're a great coffee shop in Raleigh. And it's beautiful. But like their brand strategy is not just that logo, it's how you go in and how the types of food they serve and how they treat you. And, you know, is your organization going to be elite? Is it going to be approachable? Do you have a customer that needs your brand to be corporate? One thing to watch for is, especially if you're like a founder of a services company, it's easy to make your brand for you. Like, hey, it's my personality. But it is worth thinking about, if there's a certain type of customer you want to serve, you should make your brand about your customer. So like, I definitely have different branding in different places for different services. So, you know, my consulting website is more professional than the figure your shit out one, if that makes sense. And I often think, I'm like, oh, is this a corporate person? I mean, I don't hide that identity, but still, like, you should think about your customer and how do they want to be talked to. One thing, the tip of the day is, if you've never heard of them, look at brand archetypes. That is actually something I'm going to be interested. Nathan went to my MBA program. I never heard about brand archetypes in my MBA program, which is bizarre to me. It's basically this framework that talks to you about brand personalities and the deep desire that they're trying to create. It's just kind of a cool framework to look at, like, what is the archetype or personality of your competitors' brands? And what's yours going to be? Like, are you a sage? Are you a rebel? I'm definitely a rebel. FYSO is definitely a rebel. And then it can kind of, you know, give you a sense of like, what's that personality that you're going to adopt that's going to make you stand out and connect with your customers. So now you've got your brand. How are you going to meet your customers? Marketing strategy is fascinating. Like, there have been so many courses taught. There's so many experts on it. And when I think about marketing, I think of it as an experiment. I often say to like my clients, like, it is not my job to have the perfect answer for you. Instead, what we're going to do together is we're going to understand our customer enough to create a hypothesis to then test. So it's kind of, I see marketing strategies very similarly to prototypes. How can you create small tests to then figure out like what's actually going to work with your customer? There has to be some kind of consistency, but still, like, I'm a big believer in like keeping it simple. Number one, the best marketing strategy you can have is, it's estimated that 80 to 90% of small businesses get their customers from word of mouth. Okay. So I'm a huge advocate for like, create the best product or service, like do amazing work that speaks for itself, and make sure your communications are abundantly clear. Like, if people don't know how to talk about what you do, even the people that love you, how are they supposed to make a recommendation for you? So clarity in your communications is actually like a lot of the space that I live in, because I'm like, if it's not clear what you do and why people should care, and I mean, I've seen this, like I've seen businesses that have had a really cool logo and a cool like atmosphere that did not have clear, like a clear market category. And so like you heard the name and you didn't know what the business was, and you saw their advertising and you didn't really understand what they did. And so, I mean, those businesses will sometimes spend like $10,000 on a magazine ad. That's just $10,000 spent on something that's not clear, right? So clarity is everything. From there, then you think about channel, like where's your customer hanging out? So it's going to depend on your industry. It's going to depend on your product. Is it visual? Is it not? If you're in the B2B space, I have seen if you have a killer ROI or amazing product market fit, LinkedIn Sales Navigator can work. I have one client that just killed it on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, where they like had pretty much one amazing case study, and that the results alone spoke for themselves, and their customers were like, their potential customers were like, all right, I'll give you 20 minutes of my time to hear more. But that doesn't work for everyone. So Another one of my friends who often works with experts who are typically found on LinkedIn, she went hard on a LinkedIn thought leadership strategy. And so like her hypothesis was, once the pandemic hit, she's like, most of her, like the traditional small business, most of her clients came from referrals. So she's like, now we live in a digital world. What do I do? Like, I can't go to the amount of networking events that I used to. And so she went hard on LinkedIn. She posted 5 days a week. So, I mean, she showed up a lot. She eventually started an interview series on owner expertise. Her and I worked on that. And then over time, like, she ended up having 9 posts. So she tested this for 90 days, right? Like, it wasn't like I'm going to do this forever. It's, I'm going to go hard on LinkedIn for 90 days and see what happens. So in doing that, she got 3 ghostwriting clients. So for the first time, she actually ended up getting referrals thanks to her thought leadership on that one channel. She had 9 posts with over 1,000 views. Her LinkedIn connections have been growing by 200 people a week. And she's also heard, like, from her network, hey, I've been loving your content on LinkedIn, and I've actually been like recommending you to my friends. So her thought leadership on LinkedIn also helped her network like keep remembering to keep her top of mind so they can make recommendations to their friends. So what's funny is LinkedIn actually furthered her word of mouth recommendations, which again is one of the quickest ways to get a great lead. Some organizations are killing it on YouTube. Some organizations have amazing e-newsletters. Others have podcasts. The newest thing is Clubhouse. I'm not sure if you're on that trend, but there's definitely going to be certain people who are going to kill it on that platform as well. But my big thing is just don't try to do everything. Come up with one strategy and be consistent enough, and set some goals, and then wait 90 days. You have to wait long enough to make sure you have enough data to confirm did it work or did it not. And then adjust. If it worked, keep going, right? Keep doing it and keep doing it better. And if it didn't, that's okay. Pivot away from it, find a new channel, come up with a new strategy. It's all an experiment. And if you're doing it right, you're not betting the farm on any one strategy. And so that way, like, you slowly get better over time. So with all this, that is the 10 things. It's a lot. Again, it's simple, but not easy. To get the content, so to go deeper, you can go to bit.ly/FYSO guide. It has to be all lowercase. And you can get that 101 page free ebook. I love that my mind blanked on ebook. There's some other contact information. We've got the FYSO Accelerator. We have our own Insta page. And then obviously I play on LinkedIn a lot. So I do a lot of B2B work. And then there's FYSOaccelerator.com. So now we're going to move into the last part where I'm going to talk a little bit about FYSO. So we call it FYSO, but as you know, it's figure your shit out. And what do? It's exactly what it sounds like. Our goal is to help you figure shit out. But in all seriousness, I've really, one of the best metaphors that I've started using for figure your shit out is this idea that when you're growing a business and when you're out in the world, if you're doing it right, you're going to show up professional. You're going to try to present confidence, right? You want to show up like an expert who knows what they're doing, even if you're first starting out, and you're always having to put your best foot forward. But the reality is we are all figuring our shit out. Let me tell you, especially in the beginning, we're all figuring your shit out. And also even those of us with more established businesses, we're sometimes at a pivot point and we're trying to figure out where to transition. And I mean, in those moments in your life are hard. And so when I think about the FYSO Accelerator, and really the reason I created it was because it was what I needed as an entrepreneur. It took me about 1.5 years to find my people that I could lean on and call when I was having a hard day and, when I was struggling. But at the end of the day, community is powerful. And when I was really at a transition point, when I didn't know whether I was going to take my business in one direction or the next, I didn't want to seem like a flake. So I completely isolated myself. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to hide from the world while I figure my shit out. But that's not what you should do. You should have a safe space and really a community that you can lean on to give you support and accountability. So the way, FYSO works is a 6 month Throughout the process, we give you plenty of tools and resources. We talk through, I mean, we go really deep into those 10 things that we just, started talking about today. We also talk about the business model canvas or the lean canvas. We get into brand and marketing and community building and so many other topics. We bring in badass speakers. You also get assigned to a learning circle of 4 to 6 peer organizations that are at a similar phase to you. Everybody signs NDAs. So one of our big goals is just to create a safe space for you to get support where you don't feel like you have to worry about someone stealing your ideas. I do have opinions about that. That is in the FYSO Founders Guide. Like, for the most part, you want to be talking about what you're doing and getting support, but still, shady things have happened, right? You want people in your life that you can trust. We also are going to bring in badass speakers. So I wrote some of them down. We've got Dr. Kenya Ador, the founder of Lean Geeks, and she's a UI expert. We've got Ali Khalifa, the founder of Designbox. So it's a global innovation house working with clients around the world to turn great ideas into products, impactful product and experiences. If you're in the mission-driven world, you might have heard of the book Cradle to Cradle, which is all about like creating products that don't create waste. Ali's worked with that guy, and he's actually out of an accelerator in Australia. And he's also, if you're from North Carolina, he's created First Fridays and SparkCon. I mean, he's just insane. His career is really, really impressive. We actually have Lisa Herr, who I mentioned earlier with Unity Web Agency. She's going to come and tell you about her founder story. And one of the latest is I was just on the phone yesterday with Kevin Christopher. So he's been a co-founder and worked at multiple startups. And now he runs a certified B Corp called Rockridge Law Firm. And they're a leading venture law practice that helps disruptive companies with aggregated data privacy, intellectual property, and technology law. He's going to be great. Like, he has some hilarious stories about, different pivots he's had to take in his career. And it's going to be fantastic. And there's more to come. So the structures, we're going to kick off in February with a 1-month boot camp. What that means is we're going to meet on Monday and Thursday evenings for 2 hours. So it's 4 weeks that we go hard. This is actually all of us in 2020 cheersing at the end of boot camp. I was looking for a photo, and that's what I could find quickly. And things that we're going to cover in boot camp is really those 5 foundational elements. We're also going to make sure that, like, a lot of the value of the program is the community. So we want to make sure you have plenty of space to get to know your cohort as a whole, as well as your learning circles on a deeper level, because that amount of trust that you have in people. I'm very big on, when you're creating new products and services, you have to be careful about whose advice you get. And one of the things that we do in FYSO is to focus more on, are you asking the right questions rather than giving you specific advice, right? Like, we might be able to direct you to what tool you should use or where you might want to start. But at the end of the day, you're going to know your customers best. You're going to know your industry. And like, you need people who are going to be honest, but that also are going to let you go through the process, because it's kind of messy building a business, and that's okay. And we kind of make it, I often joke that, like, even when I was starting out, like, I knew what I was supposed to do, like, theoretically, like, I had an MBA, but you have to eat your vegetables. And so, having a community to eat your vegetables with makes it a lot more fun. Then for the next 5 months, you have weekly check-ins, either with your learning circle or over group coaching. Also, based on feedback from this last cohort, we're going to still have speakers once a month. And then that way you can stay inspired and learn from their mistakes. Different topics we cover over those 5 months. We talk a little bit about customer personas. I'm a huge fan. Storytelling, community building, email marketing, social media marketing. So we're getting into the channels. How to prototype, how to do negotiation and sales, copywriting. Oh, that's one of my favorites. How do you write marketing, like, write in such a way that you can make sales? One thing that's unique about our program is, since you're determining what success means to you, this is kind of unlike traditional accelerators, where they'll make an investment and you'll give up equity in your organization. So in turn, with FYSO, you invest in your success, in yourself. And the way it works is that means a lot of things. Like some founders will leave the program and decide, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, this is not for me. I'm happier in a more established company. Others will save a ton of time. Others will pivot more quickly. And as for the investment, the programs pay what you can. So we're a mission-driven certified B corporation. And we want anyone that wants this resource to have access to it. And so regardless of your financial circumstances, you can participate, but we have a suggested price of $14.95. And you can choose to invest that now, or we ask that when you're wildly successful in the future, if you can, if you don't invest now, that you pay it forward by one day eventually paying us. So we have a sustainable program, right? No money, no mission. This does cost to bring in amazing experts and run this program. Also, one of the things too is we found having a stake in the game also helps, right? Like when you see this as an investment, it's a lot of time, right? Like it's a big investment of your time and energy and effort. And so like we want you to be involved and be engaged and be invested. Some of the alumni of the program have shared that FYSO has given them clarity. The community is huge. We're like still, our alumni network meets quarterly. It's definitely saved a handful of people from making terrible investments. That makes me so happy when we can prevent that. Pivoting, knowledge, support, connections, confidence, right? Like it's so many things, right? Sometimes it's intangible, but the biggest thing is going through the process and I really believe it's community. So with that, I know we have about 6 minutes. My question for you is, do you have any questions? Also, FYI, early bird applications end on Friday. So if you're interested at all, just apply. It's a pretty easy application. And then you get a bonus coaching session with me, which is fun because we get to hang out more. But beyond that, do you have any other questions? And feel free to come off mute or put it in chat. Up to you.
Christina, there's one question in chat asking if you can share the employee engagement stats again.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to have to, you know what, in my follow-up email, I'm going to send them all to you because there's like the 70% of Americans are unengaged, but then there's also 2 different studies that I pulled. There was like a Deloitte study was the one that showed that 73% of employees who work at mission-driven companies are engaged. And then there's a different Harvard Business Review that assessment that like looked into the productivity tied to engagement and inspiration. So just so you like have them more specifically, I'm very nerdy about that kind of stuff. And so I want to make sure you can actually get those sources because I love those stats. I think they're really compelling. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Like you spend more time at work than you do with your friends and family. Why should it not matter? Like it should. It should not just be about making money. It's important, but it's great to have purpose. Any others? Did I answer it all? Also the other option is you can email me, Christina at FYSOaccelerator.com if you have questions. I know it's kind of weird getting in front of all, of a webinar. All right. Well, I think we'll call it. If anyone wants to stay off and ask a question, off the screen, we're more than happy to do that. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming and taking your time. I know time is the most valuable resource, so it means so much that you were able to come today. I hope this was helpful. I'd love to get your feedback on what, your biggest insights were. And I hope to see many of you soon. Bye, everyone.